SD split in terms of sunshine, brightest and sunniest towards the west, and through the weekend we're going to see more dry and sunny weather for most of us, but it is also going to turn colder, so an increasing risk of some frost and some fog. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dewbs & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Good evening to you, I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, the political speeches from the main parties have begun. Messages of hope and change from Keir Starmer today. And you can tell that we're in election season because about 5 minutes after that, Rishi Sunak tried to wrestle those headlines back by confirming that the general election will indeed likely be the back end of this year. We'll get into all of that, but I also want to know from you, what do you want to see as the political priorities and focus in 2024? Also as well, the bosses of FTSE 100 companies have today already earned the salary that it'll take the average UK worker the rest of the year to earn. How much of a problem is this pay inequality in your mind? Tell me. And Boris Johnson says that he's worried about the politicisation of the Metropolitan Police. He's referring to their investigation into alleged Israeli war crimes. What do you think to that? Is he right or not? And last but not least, of course, names associated now with the Jeffrey Epstein case have been released. Was that the right move? And what would it mean, perhaps, for the people that are on there? And have you seen as well, Prince Andrew, he's again been referred back to the Metropolitan Police. There's many people, I'm suspecting, will hope that all of this will just go away. Well, we're going to debate all of that, but before we do, let's cross live to Polly Middlehurst for tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom tonight. The Prime Minister has confirmed today he is working towards a general election in the second half of this year. Rishi Sunak, who's been under some pressure to call a vote, made the comments during a visit to the East Midlands today. Both Labour and the Liberal Democrats have been pushing for a spring election. The Prime Minister declined to rule that out, saying instead he wants to focus on the economy, cutting taxes and tackling illegal migration.
My working assumption is we'll have a general election in the second half of this year, and in the meantime I've got lots that I want to get on with. This Saturday we'll be introducing a significant tax cut for millions of people in work, worth on average £450 for an average worker. Because we've halved inflation, we want to keep managing the economy well and cutting people's taxes, and I want to keep tackling illegal migration. And we cut the number of arrivals last year by over a third, but we've got more to do, and we want to get the Rwanda scheme through Parliament and up and running. So look, I've got plenty to get on with, and that's what I'm focused on doing, delivering for the British people.
Meanwhile, the Labour leader said he's ready to go to the polls now, and he's criticised the Prime Minister for delaying the vote, accusing him of wasting time. During his New Year speech, Sir Keir Starmer vowed to stand up for working people and said the character of politics will change if Labour wins power.
If the Prime Minister is now hinting that it's going to be later in the year, then I think the question is, what's he hiding? Well, this is a serious issue for the country. If he can't name a date, then effectively he's just squatting in Downing Street, holding the country back with his dithering and delaying. So he needs to come clean.
More bad weather's on the way. Nottinghamshire County Council today declared a major incident along the River Trent because of flooding and rising river levels. And that's as more heavy rain is forecast to hit the UK, with a yellow alert in place until 3 a.m. in regions from Cornwall right across east to Norfolk. Train operators are also warning services could be cancelled tomorrow because of the weather. Meanwhile, an incident during Storm Henk on Tuesday has forced Thames Valley Police to refer itself for independent investigation after a driver died after hitting a tree in Oxfordshire. It happened about an hour and a half after police received a report the tree had fallen. Detectives investigating the murder of a teenager stabbed in London on New Year's Eve are appealing now for the public's help. They've released images of two people they want to identify. If you're watching on television, you can see them now. And the police are saying they were pictured in North London on Sunday night. 16-year-old Harry Pittman died during what's been described as an altercation as crowds gathered on Primrose Hill in London to watch the New Year's Eve fireworks. 3 teenagers were arrested in connection with the murder at first, but have since been bailed pending further inquiries. Now, as you've been hearing, Prince Andrew has been reported to the police by the campaign group Republic after more allegations of sexual assault were revealed in unsealed Epstein court documents. The Duke of York, Donald Trump and Bill Clinton are among over 150 people named in those documents detailing connections to Jeffrey Epstein. The unsealed files were part of a civil lawsuit against Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is herself serving a 20-year sentence for recruiting underage girls for Epstein. Many of those named aren't accused of any wrongdoing. The document also includes an allegation by one woman, Joanna Schoberg, claiming the Duke of York touched her inappropriately in 2001. More documents are expected to be unsealed or unredacted in the coming days. The so-called Islamic State terror group has claimed responsibility for the attacks that killed nearly 100 in Iran. State TV showed footage of crowds running from a memorial for a senior commander killed 4 years ago. Iranian leaders have vowed revenge for the explosions. And the Foreign Secretary says attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea must stop immediately. Lord Cameron made the comments during his visit to a Kosovo peacekeeping mission for NATO. Drone attacks by Iran-backed Houthis from Yemen in international shipping lanes have drawn condemnation, with the UK, the US and other countries issuing a joint statement warning there will be consequences.
It's not just a British interest, this is a global interest. It really matters that ships are able to carry their cargoes without being attacked through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal and elsewhere in the world. That's why we sent ships to help with Prosperity Guardian. That's why we will use those ships to stop missile attacks. But the clear message here, and over 10 countries have signed a statement saying to the Houthis, these attacks are unacceptable, they're illegal, and they've got to stop. And if they don't stop, action will be taken.
Lord Cameron, that's the news on GB News, on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's News Channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. This is Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7 o'clock. Alongside me, I've got my panel PR consultant, Alex Dean, and the former Labour advisor, Matt Larser. Good evening,
Good evening.
gents.
Good evening.
I'm going to jump massively on the darts bandwagon. It's not on my agenda tonight, but I can't resist it. Did either of you watch it?
I'm a huge fan, and I thought your discussion earlier about encouraging it in schools is a great idea. We had it in school on our computer. It was the first computer game I remember playing because it really encourages your math skills.
Yeah, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think you know, I'm all for a bit of darts. My mum used to like a bit of darts, you know, half a lager and a quick game of darts. So yeah, I'm all in favour of. They're weeping in Warrington still.
You can just imagine though all the parents going, let me get this straight. I've spent every single weekend in the pouring rain, up and down the country, at the touchlines, getting my kids involved in whether it's football, rugby, and actually all they have to do is take them to the pub with them.
It depends what you're after. If you're after results for financial outcomes, plainly I think the best sport to put your kid into is golf, where the financial rewards are crazy. You may not like golf, and you may think the investment you have to put in kit and equipment and so forth is very high. Football, great things, helps people break out of poverty. It's one of the routes for people to success from the working class in this country, as is boxing. But for a very accessible sport, for a very low expenditure up front, darts is brilliant.
Indeed, and we were speaking about it with Martin a second ago, and we were talking about potentially putting those dartboards in classrooms, and we're suggesting, well, what about those darts that were getting chucked all over at the wrong kids, wouldn't they? But actually, during the break, I thought about it a bit more. You could get magnetic, couldn't you? You could get
they had those Velcro ones. You get the Velcro ones.
That's how Littler started. Littler started with a magnetic set.
About 18 months old.
Yeah, in his nappies, throwing darts.
But, you know, my dad was a professional ping-pong player for the first 10 years of his life.
Was he really?
The cheeky chappy Larser. They came from Australia to Britain to play ping-pong.
Did he really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you learn something new every single day about people, don't you, everyone? Anyway, that wasn't on my agenda. Tell me, though, did you watch it last night? I actually did, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. What is on your mind tonight, though? gbviews@gbnews.com is how you reach me, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Let's kick off politics then, shall we? Because you can tell it's a new year. You can tell that everyone's getting ready for the election, can't you? Because you saw Keir Starmer. He was giving his, I would say, quite long speech. I get a little bit bored. When they're too long, I start zoning out. I'm not sure whether or not that is the right approach in this modern day. Is it? You tell me. Are you still engaged when you're sitting? Are you listening intently, or do you zone off a little bit? Anyway, he was talking about how Labour are going to be the party of hope and change. That was a crucial word coming through, how different they are from being the party of yesteryear when Corbyn was ahead of that. Seconds later, it felt like Rishi Sunak then popped up, trying to wrestle back those headlines, basically saying that he's going to have call the general election in the second half of this year. There's been a lot of speculation about that, and lots of people have been popping up. Ed Davey with his Tory removal service ban and all the rest of it. Pick any aspect you want of the political landscape of this country.
You've said a lot there, and I think there's a lot to get into. First of all, I generally think long speeches in the modern age are a bad idea. Most people don't watch whole speeches anymore. They watch for clips, and the clips are chosen for them by media outlets like this one. And the longer you go, the more the chances the clip isn't the one you want. So just pragmatically, in the current environment, long speeches tend to be a bad idea, even if they were good. Secondly, It seems to me that Starmer has tried to distance himself from Corbyn so many times now that he's rather over-egging it. And every time he tries to demonstrate the distance from it, it reminds people he wanted Corbyn to be Prime Minister. Thirdly, a good old bit of politicking. Rishi Sunak pops up the day that the leader of the opposition is doing his speech and spikes his guns with some election chat. Good old-fashioned base politicking. One enjoys seeing it. Let's not pretend it's anything other than that, but it was quite fun. But the thing I think people might have missed today is what's happening with the third party. And it's not the success that Sir Ed Davey thinks he may have enjoyed in Surrey. It's the criticisms he's getting for being the Minister for the Post Office during the Post Office inquiry.
Yes, indeed.
I think this is actually the biggest news of the day. And publication of the letter that he sent back to the hero of the film that we've seen, basically telling him to do one, that you couldn't possibly see a reason for meeting with him. I think that's the news of the day.
Yeah, you're saying it'll be interesting. We covered this Horizon scandal last night with Peter Hitchens and Aaron Bastani and was talking about what should the consequences be of that. And that is, you're absolutely right, that is going to overshadow Ed Davey. He's come out and said now, in response to that letter that Alex is referring to, he's basically come out and said that he feels he was essentially misled by people, and that's why he turned down meeting Alan Bates at that point in time. Can he turn that around, though? Because this Horizon thing, it's gone on for years, but now it's very much on the public conscience.
Absolutely. I think the drama this week has really brought it home, hasn't it? And it's kind of created Alan Bates into a national hero. And I think, yes, the most important consequence isn't going to be the head of the Post Office at the time, whether or not she hands back her honour, her CBE. It could actually potentially really undermine Ed Davey, because at the very least, even if he says he was misled, he shows a remarkable lack of curiosity about it at the time. There were lots of there was lots of media coverage at the time. It was an active issue. It wasn't like it was something that you could just sort of pass over. And he's clearly accepted the briefing that he was given by his officials. He's now going to use that as his line of defence, but I'm not sure how long that's going to hold as a line of defence.
Well, let's make a basic point that is true in politics now as it was when it was set out as a principle. Advisers advise, ministers decide. You can say, my advisers told me this or that. In the end, the reason we elect you is to make the decisions. He made the decision to sign that letter. He chose not to see the people who were running that campaign, and he knew that people were suffering. Not one or two either, lots of them.
But you see, there's part of me that agrees with what you're saying, Alex, but then I think of Dominic Cummings, and many people would say that he was the adviser that was also deciding.
Well, that was the problem.
He turned that on his head.
Yeah, I mean, that's where he ran into trouble.
And you're a former advisor as well.
Absolutely, you've got to have the dividing line. I can just say I'm glad I'm not the beginning of the year, the 3rd of January speech. Everybody on New Year's Day trying to write the speech, the New Year's speech.
So give the viewers some insight then. Those people that have not been involved in this kind of stuff. So what will have been going on? What goes on in the run-up to this big kind of monumental opening of the year?
So some of it will have been decided before Christmas, but in particular they will have been got Christmas out of the way, because that includes recording the New Year message, which is only a few days ago, and then the whole team will have been involved in the speech. And I mean, I want to.
Who? When you say the whole team,
so you have the director of strategy, who will feed in from the focus groups. You've got the director of comms. You've got the speechwriter. You've got the chief of staff. Keir has a very powerful chief of staff in Sue Gray, who we all remember from Capegate, absolutely. And so what basically happens is people try and write a speech in the margins of a Word document as 27 versions get knocked around. So when I used to say you cannot write a speech in, people putting comments in a Word document, and you just need one person to hold the pen, as it were, because otherwise you end up with a mishmash and you don't have the person's voice coming through.
But who gets the final say? Is it, as Alex says, it's literally the minister, Keir?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the leader signs the speech off. But it depends how hands-on they are in terms of the language. Neil Kinnock, if we remember him, he used to love writing speeches. It was one of his great passions, and some of them are very good. Some of them are way too long, but some of them are very good. So he would take more of an interest. Others just like to take the kind of draft and then work with it. It depends how close the relationship is with the speechwriter, whether they feel that speechwriter really captures their voice, and therefore they can rely on them to make it sound like them.
And talking about advisors, Alex, back to your point, of course, there was the suggestions that Sunak had been potentially discreetly re-engaging with Dominic Cummings. What do you make to that?
I think Cummings, and I was probably the last Japanese soldier on my jungle island defending Cummings, sticking his kids with his parents when He had his famous trip to Barnard Castle. But I think Cummings has been slinging so much mud at the Conservative Party, it'd be questionable for me to see any kind of restoration. People can give it, all sorts of people can give advice to government, but a formal role will be a surprise to me. I just want to pick up on one thing that Matthew said. It's always very easy to hark back to a golden age, and you may say, well, you would say that because the Tories were thrashing the Labour Party election after election. But I remember when Kinnock was leader of the Labour Party that we had really interesting, ideological, thoughtful speakers on both sides of the House. Margaret Thatcher setting out the case for the free market, and Neil Kinnock, who would sometimes agonise. I remember his advisors writing, he would say, I can't find the words. He was looking at his Shakespeare, he was trying to think about the right words to champion the working class issues that he so profoundly stood for. I thought that was a great time in politics. And sometimes, you know, people say, oh, the speeches aren't the meaningful thing, it's the substance that means things. Actually, sometimes the good, decent substance produces great speakers and great speeches.
Yeah, and it can produce sound bites. I mean, one of the things that Keir was very conscious of, I mean, the exact phrase when he was looking for a speechwriter is, I don't want somebody who thinks that I'm Obama, because he ain't going to ever be Obama. He's never going to hit the soaring heights of rhetoric that, you know, can move people to tears. So he wanted, you know, he knows that he's quite a workmanlike speaker, and he wanted somebody who could write in that voice rather than try and make him a poet.
Yeah, and I've got to say, this Cummings thing baffles me, because so much of what has gone on in the last kind of couple of years with the Tories, I look and I think, surely you must sit on a most basic level and think to yourself, this is not like the right kind of thing to be doing at this point in time. And when it comes to Dominic Cummings, why would a Tory leader even trust him? Even to have an initial conversation?
I don't know the ins and outs of the exchange that he did or didn't have with Number 10. He's clearly someone who had some remarkable insights as to what had gone well and not gone well during COVID, and you may learn from that. But I think, point out the obvious. People in those roles, I work for a political party myself, people in those roles are not of interest in and of themselves. They are of interest because they hold their role through the imprimatur of their boss. You care far less about what Dominic Cummings thinks now, because he's not the trusted mouthpiece, or he's not the trusted advisor to Number 10. It's the role that makes the person significant, and they become significant because an elected person made them so.
Well, I'll tell you who became insignificant today. Keir Starmer tried very hard to make Jeremy Corbyn insignificant. A lot of the Labour speech was all about that focus of change. We are different. We are a new party. I'll tell you who wasn't buying into any of that. John McDonnell, you remember him, of course, from the Corbyn era. He's basically piped up today as well, and he's been saying that if Labour do get elected and they don't create radical change, then he says it'll basically mean that Britain essentially is going to shift to what he calls the far right. He's talking about the need for radical change on things like wage policy. So after the break, I want to look at all of that and also ask, this wage inequality, FTSE 100 bosses already earning the annual salary for the average UK worker. Is that a problem? Tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m. Lord Bailey hits back against accusations of sexism by Carol Vorderman.
On one hand, she's got all that stuff, you know, she's a serious political commentator. Then if you look at her Instagram, it's all pictures of her bums and her boobs. So what is it? What is it here? She can't be both.
Trigger warnings for James Bond. An ex-Bond girl kicks off. Starmer wants votes for kids and should Ed Davey quit over the postmaster scandal. A window into a Lib Lab coalition of chaos. And does King Charles need to talk about Andrew, who's just been reported to the police by Republic? All of that on Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m.
Hello there, you're watching, listening to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7 PR consultant Alex Dean alongside me, as is the former Labour advisor Matt Larser. Mike says, Michelle, one of your panellists has just said that darts is an affordable sport. What is he talking about? How much do you think it costs to get a belly like that? That's Mike's words, my view is not mine. I take no responsibility for any offence caused by Mike. Ray says, you might be interested to know, Michelle, that the darts legend Bobby George spent years taking his dartboard and his darts into schools to help teach the kids mental maths. So he did. Well, credit to him. Jim says, Michelle, talking politics, I'd happily see Keir Starmer in number 10. He asks, what is the worst that can happen? Graham says, the best thing for this country is to get rid of the shower of incompetent, greedy, out-of-touch civil servants, he says. We should also, all right, get rid of the government and the opposition and start all over again. Ian says, who said never believe anything until it has been officially denied? Latter half of the year, says Rishi Sunak, when talking about the next general election date. Ian predicts that basically means let's go for May then. What do you make to it all? I was talking at the start of the programme about, of course, the political speeches have started. A lot of what Keir Starmer seemed to speak about today was a distancing from Jeremy Corbyn, talking about hope and talking often about being the party of change and being very different. Well, someone that wasn't massively different to Jeremy Corbyn is former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell. He spoke out today also and says that if the Labour Party gets elected, Matthew, and doesn't create what he calls radical change in the form of things like wage strategy, which I'll come on to in a second, he says that the country essentially is going to shift to what he calls the far right. Park the wage bit for now. Yeah. This whole far-right notion, he then goes on to talk about parties like Reform, UK, etc. Expand.
Yeah, I mean, look, so for the what you might call the hard left, like Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, they're always obsessed with, what they would describe as fighting fascism, because that's all part of the DNA, the songs that they sing, the posters that are up, and obviously great battles were fought in the past. But I think to dub sort of anybody who is mildly considering voting for Reform as far-right or it's not a wise electoral strategy. So I think Keir Starmer needs to not listen to the advice. I think he's right to the extent that I think, Labour needs to be about an economy that works for working people, which we'll come on to talk about. But I think that, sort of apocalyptic visions of the country turning to fascism, if Starmer doesn't do what John McDonnell says, is a bit daft.
Yeah, but this whole notion that if you disagree with someone, if someone's doing something you disagree with, and heaven forbid they perhaps, Alex, believe in things like controlled immigration, that they are by by definition, these far-right lunatic thugs. It's just ridiculous.
John McDonnell's perspective of the world...
it's not just John McDonnell who does this,
No, I know,
by the
but
way.
he's the example we're talking about, and I remind myself, as I think about him, that not deserving our charity, that he said that you should lynch a Tory minister, was his response to talking about a woman that he didn't like in Parliament, a fellow parliamentarian. In Britain, we should take some pride in the fact that we have neither successful far-right nor successful far-left movements. We don't have a really meaningful electoral force in the communist vein, and unlike our friends in Spain with Vox, in France with the Front National, now rebooted, Germany, the Alternative for Deutschland, polling 20% plus. The British National Party in this country deregistered. You know, it's no longer even a political party. So McDonnell thinks that everyone outside of a very small group on the far left is the far right. And when the words far right come to mean the same thing as someone I disagree with, it loses all meaning.
Yeah.
So Starmer should just ignore him.
I remember on Armistice Day, do you remember that, when there was these concerns about the cenotaph being desecrated, vandalised, etc. Anyone then had the audacity to say, I don't know, former veterans or whatever, that said that they would perhaps go and protect that cenotaph. They were very often referred to as far-right. It just gets thrown around all the time, that phrase, doesn't it, all too often. But one of the points that John McDonnell was making was the fact that actually radical change is needed to stop the inequalities in this country, which links me nicely to the fact that today is what people are calling Fat Cat Thursday. This apparently is the day that, by now, get this everybody, FTSE 100 bosses have already earned, right now, here and now, I think it was about 1 o'clock this afternoon, the amount of money that the average UK worker will take to earn by over a year. So 1 year's salary done and dusted already by the FTSE 100 bosses. Massive wage inequality, that can't be denied, but is it problematic, Alex?
No. I am intensely relaxed about people becoming filthy rich as long as they pay their taxes, said Peter Mandelson, and that's a view with which I agree. There are some people in this country who would rather see the poor get poorer as long as they drag the rich down. That's the politics of envy for you. I'm happy with an environment in which an improving economy, or people employing more people and innovating and investing, in that kind of environment, hiring more people and having more jobs. I'm happy in a country where the worst off get better off as a result of an improving economy. And if that means that the most wealthy get even wealthier, I don't care.
Do you care, Mark?
Yeah, I agree that people should be rewarded for success, but they shouldn't be rewarded for mediocrity. So I think there is an issue about chief executives' pay getting out of control in the private sector. There's also an issue in the public sector where we've seen, you know, university vice chancellors being paid $300,000-400,000, you know, twice what the Prime Minister gets. So, yeah, I think wage inequality does matter. I'm not in favour of the government coming in with its size 10 boots, but I think the shareholders, which is most of us have our pensions, which through us, our shareholders should put more pressure to ensure that there's a sensible strategy which rewards success, but you know, but make sure that actually you have to achieve serious targets to get the serious money.
Oh, I'm all for that. I'm all for the business by business question of whether you've got the pay for your chief exec right. So that's a question for remuneration committees, and it's a question for AGMs. It's a question, as you rightly say, for shareholders. But the idea it's something for the state to be involved in, that's for the birds. And the idea that we should mark this day as being something relevant seems to me ridiculous as well.
And what about these people toy with the ideas of ratios, don't they? So you're going to cap the maximum earner. So just to give you all some clarity at home, the average FTSE 100 CEO gets about £4 million a year. Yes, you did indeed hear that right. Whilst the average worker apparently gets about 35,000. So some people will say, well, what you have to do is create a calculation, a mechanism whereby you apply a ratio. So whatever the ratio is, you guys can decide. And that means that that top guy or woman cannot earn more than the ratio of that middle earner.
Yeah, so I mean, it's about 100 at the moment, and people, you know, campaigners go anything from 30, 50, 70 or 100. I think it's very hard for the government to step in and do that, but I think it's not a bad way for shareholders when they're looking at success to work out, you know what the multiple is. And, you know, no chief executive, as we've seen, is worth, you know, 1,000 times what an average worker's paid. Chief executives, remember, are not people who started the companies. These are not the great entrepreneurs coming up with the big ideas.
Yeah.
Almost all of them are are, you know, are professional managers who've been, you know, who've been lucky.
Yeah, but there's a sorry, Alex, there's a different skill set between. So many people will start a business and be very entrepreneurial and pioneer, and then what those people will do is they recognise that the skill set of disrupting and being entrepreneurialism is very different to the skill set required of then the man management and the growth and all the rest of it. So it's a completely different skill set. So it's not the same thing.
No, but I think that those who come up with the ideas and who then often sell the businesses are the ones who get rewarded with the big bucks. I'm in favour of managers getting decent remuneration, but there has to be a sensible middle way.
It's interesting, though, because, first of all, if you do start capping these things, you'll deny yourself the very best people in the market who will just find a job in other countries. But the second thing to say is that as soon as you start these rules, you will find exceptions. And just when you think there's one that there can't be one, there will be one. Yeah. So I'm going to get my gambling company wrong, so I won't say which one. But Betfair, Bet365. The woman who founded in her...
Is she called Denise Perch?
Yeah. She is, yeah.
Yeah, fabulous.
She was one of our top taxpayers last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she took home what in anyone's life is a truly eye-watering amount of money. And if it wasn't 1,000 times someone's employed, it was certainly several hundred.
But she started the company and built it up with her family, yeah. So that's to me, I'm more relaxed about that than the sort of chief executive of an energy company, you know, getting big bucks and getting, you know, X times what an ordinary salary is. But I think I think government, you know, government will get it wrong if government starts to intervene. But I think it's quite fun just to press us all at the beginning of January to find out how many more days we've got to go before any of us match these.
But there'll be people listening to what you just said, Alex, when you just said, you know, basically if you push them, they'll run off to a different country. And this is a frequent pushback from the right, isn't it? So if you raise taxes too high, people will leave the country. If you do this to the rich, they'll leave the country. Would they really? So if you said, you know what, so-and-so, whatever your name is, you can only earn now, instead of 4 million a year, you can earn 3 million a year. And if he did decide, you know what, I nearly swore then, but no thank you, I'm going to go to a different country, well, up comes the next layer of talent, doesn't it?
Well, you're not talking here about thousands of managers up and down the country. The question you chose was specifically about the top 100 businesses in the United Kingdom, a large number of which will be run by people from abroad. It's not a question, and who've been attracted here because they're going to run big businesses for a suitably whopping package. And if you are going to say that effectively you're going to make the UK less attractive to that next generation, it's the inverse of what you think. It's not just saying, here comes the next generation of talent from within the UK. You're denying yourself in the global marketplace of ultra talent for that top 100 jobs. You're denying yourself the best of the best.
The access to that global pool. I can hear some of you guys at home as well saying, Michelle, it's not just about the very top bosses. What about all those middle management? There's layers and layers of middle management everywhere. Private sector, civil service, you name it. Many people, many of you will say, well, what do they even do all day? They earn an absolute fortune, squeeze with their salaries and give that to the bottom. Is that a strategy? You tell me. I want to talk to you after the break about the Metropolitan Police. Boris Johnson, he says that they are becoming politicised now. Why? He's saying because they're spending their time investigating potential war crimes that people have alleged have been performed by Israel in this war with Hamas. Do you think they should be doing different things with their time or not? Tell me and I'll see you in 2.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co. Tools 7 alongside me, the PR consultant Alex Dean and the former Labour advisor Matt Laza. I'll be talking about the Met Police investigating potential Israeli war crimes in just a second. But you guys, again, are divided in terms of politics. Richard, compliment for you. He says the only way I would ever vote Labour if Matthew was the leader.
Oh. Thank you very much, Richard.
Is Richard your dad or your brother? Or?
No, sadly, I don't have one of either, but thank you, Richard.
One of my other viewers says, our democracy is a sham. Whatever party is elected, it won't change the fact that we are run by the elite for the elite. It's not my country anymore, and many people feel like that. He says, my sole aspiration is to retire to the Isle of Wight and play crazy golf. Well, there you go. We're just talking about if you do indeed start capping the top salaries of the FTSE 100 bosses, would they leave? Would they go somewhere else? One of my viewers had just written and said, yes, Michelle, they absolutely would. My son is about to relocate to Dubai because of tax reasons. So she says it definitely happens. Well, there you go. The Met Police now is investigating potential war crimes committed by Israel and Hamas. And Boris Johnson, he has been speaking out about this. He's essentially saying that it's a sign that the Met Police are being what he calls politicised. It's happening now at some airports. You might have seen some of these posters. Essentially, when you get off various different flights, there's a poster appeal asking for witnesses to report allegations relating to, misdeeds in Israel, Gaza, wherever. Is this where you think that the Met Police should be spending their time? Is Boris Johnson right? Are they being politicised?
So I don't think this is where the Met Police should be spending most of its time. We are part of the International Criminal Court, and so we have to play our part. If we're going to be a member, we have to do our bit. But I'm not sure that putting posters up at Heathrow is actually going to garner any evidence. So if they do pursue a war crimes trial and somebody flees to London, then the police and the authorities should get involved. But I think on a day-to-day basis, the Met has got far more pressing issues than this.
Yeah, but Alex, sorry, you go.
Sure. Our real responsibility under the treaties we signed up for is to ensure that people can't be fugitives here from international justice. It's not to try and talk to everyone coming off a 747 and say, have you got something to tell me about what you saw in the Middle East? But it seems to me that I'm not being flippant about these things. It's not just a bad set of priorities. Stabbing is out of control in our capital city. The Metropolitan Police has its priority plain and centre right in front of it, and it's on the front page of the newspapers, centre of our attention, almost sadly every single day in our capital city. The idea that they're floundering around for priorities and hit upon this one, to me, as someone who lives in London, it feels rather sickening.
Yeah, but they would say that, hang on a second, because this is just not your average Bobby on the beat that's doing this. They will say that they've got a counter-terrorism policing unit, and it's that unit that's responsible for investigating things like the war crimes.
In any system, unless it has infinite resources, you have to decide where your priorities go. And the point I was making at the outset was that our responsibilities under these treaties is to ensure that people can't find the UK a safe haven in fleeing from their crimes. It's not to try and go out and garner great wadges of evidence from someone who may have been in the Middle East. And the idea that someone who has been in the Middle East saw something terrible, saw something that's useful as evidence, and might otherwise just think, oh, I won't do anything about it. Aha!
I saw a poster.
Here's an invitation from the Metropolitan Police. The idea that that's the priorities being set by our police force in a city where people are being stabbed to death every day, I just think is madness. And you know what? For all their pseudo defences that they've sent through to the channel and so forth, there are people who watch this and just see straight through it.
Yeah, you see, I think you've both been collectively a little bit harsh. Yes, I do. I concur that the Met Police are failing abysmally, by the way, in knife crime. And knife crime, you know, is affecting communities not just in London, up and down the country. It feels like it's getting worse, although people might perhaps point to statistics to say that violent crime sometimes in places is not getting worse, but it certainly feels like it is. But these are two separate things, and surely a police force can do completely different things. And if someone has been on holiday or away or whatever, or is coming back and is part of a situation where something has gone wrong, they know in their heart that something is not quite right, what is the harm in saying to those people, look, here's an outlet. If you know something, if you've got something, here's an outlet. What bad can come of that?
The harm and the bad is very specific and very obvious. For every person you put on this duty, whether it be liaising with Heathrow, deciding where these things go up, taking prank calls, talking to people whose evidence is worthless, taking witness statements which go nowhere, prioritising things that aren't the UK's priority, every person you ask to do those things is someone who isn't investigating a knife crime in the UK. Every person you ask to do that and use on that resource is someone who isn't on the beat. And it's just the same as the fact that we send people to go knock on someone's door because of a tweet they've sent. It's the same misallocation of scarce resources.
Yeah, I don't mind one or two people in HQ at New Scotland Yard who deal with international... That's part of their international responsibilities. But as you say, having these posters up will then produces a workload because you're going to have a lot of people who are politically motivated who are going to make comments which you then have to log and treat because every comment's going to be taken seriously.
The number of people who will, as a result of these posters, ring in and say, I saw those terrible Israelis do this, and frankly also the number of people who say I saw terrible Hamas do that will be non-trivial. And therefore the police in the United Kingdom, which should be policing the streets of London, will find itself doing work it didn't need to do.
Yeah, but this conflict, this Israel-Gaza conflict, is having a knock-on effect on the safety of the streets in Britain. It's quite unique in that way. And this unit, by the way, they also get similarly involved in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, so it's not just unique to this one. But the Israel-Gaza conflict does, I would say, argue that it does affect the safety on these streets. But also, what you're saying then could be true about any old poster with any old call this detail, call this number.
You have made the point perfectly for me. Our police force is currently unable to ensure law and order on the streets of London when it comes to disputes between supporters of Israel and supporters of Palestine. The notion they should suddenly set about trying to ensure law and order on the streets in Gaza via taking evidence at Heathrow is absurd.
What do you guys make to it all? I get what you're saying. I understand the sentiment. I really, really do. And I can hear you at home saying, yes, we want better policing on the streets, on domestic issues. But surely, do you feel, as I perhaps do, that there is an element that this kind of stuff is required as well? Or am I completely missing the point? I'm sure you won't be shy in telling me if you think that I am. Now, let's talk as well after the break about Jeffrey Epstein files. Have you seen these now? Many, many names have come out. This is just the start of these disclosures. It's certainly not the end. What does it mean for the people involved? Was a judge right to reveal this information? Prince Andrew, he has been apparently reported again to the police because of it all. Is that what the police should be doing? You guys tell me your thoughts on this whole Epstein mess. I'll see you in 2.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, you're watching, listening to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7, PR consultant Alex Dean and the former Labour advisor Matt Laza alongside me. I've got to say, your sentiment, chaps, is echoed among a lot of viewers at home. You're all, many of you are saying that your primary focus are the streets of Britain and helping to keep those safe. Many of you saying that you feel that currently they are not. Richard says, I've got lots of viewers call Richard. It's not the same one, I promise. He says that Boris is absolutely correct when he says that the police are being politicised. I don't understand, says Diana, how they've got themselves involved in this kind of stuff if they apparently haven't got the time or the manpower to investigate homegrown crime. I do have to stress that it is, of course, a separate division, the Metropolitan Police would argue, but let's now talk about Jeffrey Epstein. We've now got our first tranche of documents that have been released. I have to stress this is the first one. The first set is certainly not the end. I think it was about 1,000 pages was the first tranche. This, of course, you'll be familiar with. It has been released by the judge in this Jeffrey Epstein case. Now, there's lots of speculation about who would be on this list. Many people, of course, very high profile. I have to stress that the people that are on the list, there's no immediate suggestion that they have been involved in wrongdoing, etc. But notwithstanding that, there are some surprising people involved in this. Stephen Hawking, for example. Donald Trump was on there, Bill Clinton, so on and so forth, Cameron Diaz. Again, I'm not suggesting any of these people have been involved in wrongdoing, but the rumour mills, etc., on social media have gone crazy.
Yeah, let's remind ourselves that people should be careful about what they speculate about online. The late Lord McAlpine demonstrated that when he took action against people who wrongly suggested that he was involved in any way in very serious offending,
yes,
after some speculation on television. But the people involved in this situation, everything from people who had their telephone numbers in a book collated by Jeffrey Epstein's secretary to people who are regularly and habitually going to his island and enjoying his hospitality and the people that he brought there. So the point I would just make about this, though, is this, that if there were serious criminality to be investigated, whilst this is the first time we've seen this data, it's been in the justice system for a little while now. So this feels to me, we were all expecting great revelations, and I'm not sure we've got them today.
And also, people, there was an opportunity, so if someone wanted their name kind of taken out, if someone wanted to challenge this, there was that opportunity for people to do so. Where are you on it, Matthew?
So, look, I feel sorry for people whose numbers just ended up in the phone book, or who once, did in American politics, they call it a grip and grin, where you just sort of, you get the little picture with the shaking hands for the office wall, but you don't actually have a conversation or know them very well. So I think that if there were serious allegations, that they would have come out already, because, as Alex says, they've been in the justice system. The many layers of the justice system have been through these already. But it's unseemly. But people need to be very careful on social media that they don't try and make they make hay when there's nothing there.
Well, social media can be indeed the Wild West, but I wonder if Prince Andrew is sweating perhaps slightly more.
He's definitely not sweating. That's the one thing he's not doing.
You see what we did there, because he has apparently been reported to the police. We're just talking about whether or not the police should have better things to do with their time. But anyway, he has been reported again to the police. I think I've got the one of the tweets here. It's from the Republica group. They've reported him back again.
Right. So let me say this. I actually, on face value, I'm far more willing to say that the police in this country should investigate serious allegations of criminality, of sexual offences and so forth, of things that happened here with British citizens and so forth, rather than going on fishing expeditions to the Middle East. I'm far more willing to say that they should investigate those things, even if they think they've been thrashed through before. But when someone has so obviously a political axe to grind as the Republican movement, you might think even someone as dense, obtuse and small in number as our Republican movement would think, let's get someone else to do it, rather than doing it ourselves.
It's not very subtle tactics.
It's so obvious what they're doing.
The Republican movement has a very valid case to make on its main issue, but I think that this just looks cheap. If there's evidence against Andrew, he needs to be investigated just like anybody else would be investigated. But he doesn't need to be used as a football, like this. And frankly, trying to make it a football yourself discredits them because it makes them look.
They are the very worst people to raise it if you believe in their cause.
Yeah.
Totally. What do you believe in that cause? What do you think to it being raised again? And do you think anything will come of it? John says, none of this stuff will lead anywhere. Essentially, the elite will protect the elite. Sorry, that was Mark who said that. You all seem to be downplaying the seriousness of the crimes committed by someone that many would call a serial paedophile, says Fred. Yes, this absolutely is important enough for our police to investigate. Different opinions. I mean...
Well, I don't downplay for a moment what Epstein did. The late Jeffrey Epstein, no longer with us and paedophile, is someone we don't need to trouble the ledger with. What we do need to worry about is people whose reputation may be unfairly sullied by association, which could be as small, as Matthew says, de minimis, as having been in the same room at the same time.
Yeah, you guys have been getting in touch as well about your political priorities. It won't surprise you to know that many people said controlling immigration was some of your political priorities this year. Energy costs and energy security was another one as well. Cost of living, I've got to say, other than the energy, that didn't really come up as much as I thought it might perhaps have done. Frankie says you're not missing the point. On the Met Police, Michelle, it's all just absolutely bonkers. Whereas Gordon says, Michelle, please, you are talking absolute rubbish. That's what I like about my viewers. You do not sit on the fence. I have to say that you're really divided in terms of the political side of things. On that wage one, I'm not sure I'm seeing much support, I have to say, for your kind of suggestions in terms of clamping down on these fat cats, although some people saying it doesn't seem right that NHS managers can earn more than the Prime Minister. So surely people are arguing there's something wrong in that. So I don't know, maybe the focus needs to be on capping public sector.
Well, I think we definitely need to do that, and that is something that the government can do directly. We need to have, there are some crazy salaries out there in the public sector, and they need to make sure that that when Labour comes into power, that it does something about that.
I'm all for cutting waste in the NHS, but to make myself unpopular at the end of the show, more unpopular, the reason this comparison is made so frequently is that we pay our Prime Minister too little.
Oh, what do you think I should get then?
I mean, the Prime Minister of Singapore is on more than 1 million, right? So let's just agree we're too low on the spectrum. And if you want people to go into politics and you want people to value that office, it's absurd to pay your PM so low and then index every other civil servant in the country on that and say they're getting more than the PM. Well, of course they are, because many more of our civil servants are remunerated appropriately, whilst our Prime Minister isn't. You're rigging the game.
There was a bit of cross-party consensus. I do think that the Prime Minister's paid too little. I think politicians need to pay a reasonable
quickly tell me then, because I'm almost out of time. How much should he get?
So I'd say more like what the Australians get, which is over 200,000.
Oh, there you go. That's a figure to send you all off into your evening with a spin in your head. 200 grand for the Prime Minister. Is that a fair amount of money? Lower? Higher? Get in touch. Jim says, I'm a retired executive, Michelle, and I can tell you one thing. If Labour win the election, I will definitely be leaving the UK. I'm not going to spend what remains of my life being unreasonably taxed. My escape plan is already organised, he says. Well, I hope you guys have not got an escape plan organised, because Nigel Farage is up next, so don't go anywhere. But for now, Matthew, thanks for your time. Alex, thanks for yours too. Thank you at home for your company. Have a good night. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. While some of us may see a touch of frost and some fog patches tonight, there is still some heavy rain affecting southeastern parts. An area of low pressure has pushed its way up as we went through today, bringing some pretty heavy rain across southern areas, and that rain is now going to feed a little bit further northeastwards, affecting particularly East Anglia into Lincolnshire through this evening and overnight. Could cause some travel disruption, and some further flooding is possible too, but that rain gradually trying to clear away through the early hours. A few showers elsewhere, but also some drier, clearer weather, particularly for inland areas, could allow for a touch of frost and also some patches of fog first thing tomorrow morning. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, a bit of a wet start for some eastern parts. A lot of that rain will clear away, but for Orkney, Shetland, some persistent rain continuing into the